So when we're talking about turning showdown hands into bluffs, there's a few really critical concepts that we need to think about first of all. The most important thing is we need to really understand what showdown value is. Quite often, a lot of my opponents are misevaluate what exactly showdown value is. Let's remember that showdown value is all about relative value, not absolute value. So there's a lot of situations where a full house in some circumstances on an ace-ace-ace board might be might have almost zero relative value, correct? But at the same time, its absolute value is a full house, so there's a big difference there. Likewise, a lot of times a hand such as queen high, particularly on a board maybe that's a double paired board, a hand such as queen high can really have a lot of showdown value. So it's really critical that first of all, we don't just get in this mindset of, oh, I have a pair of fours or I have fifth pair. There's a lot of situations where fifth pair against a certain opponent, maybe we're playing a very tough heads-up opponent, fifth pair can actually have a lot of showdown value. At the same time, maybe we're playing a really tight, weak player that continues to bet at us. In that situation, obviously, then fifth pair is going to have almost no showdown value. So it's really critical that you understand that showdown value is all about having relative value, not absolute value. As a general rule, you need more showdown against a tough player than a weak player. This makes a lot of sense, right? Because a weak player often will allow you to get to showdown with your really weak hands. How often have you checked down ace high really with no intention of betting it, and the weaker player allows you just to continue to check it down and to show the winner? How often have you bet bottom pair and then all of a sudden you've seen the weaker player show up with worse? Heck, I swear once or twice a session I really have a fun time winning with jack high or queen high or something like that I just never expect to against the weaker player. Likewise, if we're playing a really tough player, it's going to be much more unlikely. Think about the really tough players that you're playing against, and let's say maybe we missed our draw on the river and we just gave up completely. How often has that king high draw that missed or ace high draw missed, how often has that been able to show down against a tough player? Honestly, it's going to be very rare because the tough player is always going to be able, or a lot of times is going to be able to turn his hand into a bluff, and he's also going to be able to evaluate showdown much more effectively than the weaker player. So as a rule, you want to have more showdown value against a tough player than you would a weak. Additionally, as a general rule, the less showdown value you have, the more willing you should be to turn hands into bluffs. I know for me personally, quite honestly, I'm sort of looking for this more than most players, I would assume. But a lot of times my friends need to talk to me and say, wait, you have second pair in this situation, or you have a weak top pair. It's not necessary that you always need to show these down. Whereas if I have, let's say, king high or fifth pair on board or something like that, in these situations I should be much more willing to turn those hands into bluffs and think that I have less showdown value. The fourth thing to think about is how critical image really is when determining these bluffs. If you have a really crazy image, or you have a guy that's really wanting to play a lot of hands with you, or you're in a situation where you've just lost a lot of hands at the table, these are spots where you really don't want to be employing these moves because they will have more reason to call you down. Likewise, let's say you're a really tight player though, and you haven't really been picking up many hands and you've been making a lot of folds, or you've just in general you've shown the opponent you're playing against just a lot of really big hands when they get to the river. Even I've had situations where guys have been telling me that I've been playing against while we've been talking that, wow, you always have the nuts against me, things like that. These are going to be the ideal guys to turn hands into bluffs against because they are so used to being shown big hands by you. So image is definitely going to be really important, as it is with just about every poker play that you can come up with, but I think in this situation you really need to evaluate image very critically before you go into these plays. And finally, before we start this, I really need to tell you guys, and this is very important because I don't want to just have you guys stacking off and losing a lot of money and then coming back to me, that it's really important that you don't fall in love with these sort of plays. They really should come through careful evaluation of ranges and dynamics. And all the hands that I am posting throughout this video, I have to tell you that they're from the last 3, 4, maybe even 5 months. What really happens when I'm playing poker is if I come into an interesting situation, I'll mark it in Poker Tracker 4 and then come back to them. And what happens is that at the end of every month, I actually compile all these hands and then just sort of list them into categories. And when I see that I have an interesting category with a lot of hands, then I think about trying to make a video about it. So that's what happened here. But the important part of that is that these aren't happening once a day, once every other day, all the time, right? So if you have a day where you're turning 15 hands into bluffs, you're probably making a mistake and you're probably playing really too spewy. So it's really important that you don't go crazy with these.